all the time so that you give timely feedback, because you've got information and assignments coming in from students at a variety of different time frames.
Yeah, it can feel like a lot more work for us, right? We're asking them to do these things, and again, we are also outside of the classroom, outside of that structured time. So do we have to be on call 24/7 in order to do that? If we are the ones that are, or if we are the only ones who are providing the resources and information, then it becomes a question of, well, they either depend on us or they figure it out for themselves. Um, and what we will try to do, of course, to mitigate that is to say, here are a bunch of resources that you can look to follow, clear directions, example number one, model number two, look to those before you come to me. Or, and this is one of the things that we suggest, we'll try to set up a peer support discussion forum, right? An online forum or someplace where they can say to their fellow students, hey, I can't figure this out. Do you have any suggestions? Piazza is one of those online tools that people use to do this very well. A beautiful thing about Piazza, one of the best things I think about Piazza, is that it allows for students to be anonymous to each other, so that I can come in with my dumb question and say, hi, everybody, you don't know who I am. Did I miss this really obvious thing? I feel stupid asking this question, but I don't have to say, hi, my name's John Martin. I'm that idiot in class who doesn't understand or who didn't listen or somehow skipped this out. And then other students can be like, oh yeah, I missed that too. And maybe enough people will say that, oh yeah, I missed that too, that as an instructor, we need to go in and say, oh, maybe I didn't cover that, or maybe I didn't cover that as well as I should have. So yeah, those are some things. But one of the strategies that I've heard is ask three before me, where you post in, I don't know, a student discussion forum. Hey, other students, did anyone else get this? Is anyone else having trouble with this? And then if they get three responses and nobody knows, then bring it to me. There are other strategies. Does anyone else have any other thoughts and strategies on how do we not spend our entire lives in this asynchronous learning spaces? And you can feel free to raise your hand or just unmute and jump in. Go ahead, Jerome.
Yeah, I think it was Kathy who made the comment about being on nonstop when you're teaching these classes, and that's certainly a feeling that I have. I'm currently teaching a big class with 850 students, and if I want to check discussion boards, it's either I do it all the time or I don't do it at all almost, or I do it way too late. I've tried using Piazza, you brought it up, and to me that sort of exacerbated that feeling actually, because I was getting notifications all the time from Piazza that someone had posted, and it may have been the way that I managed it, but my students did not really take on the opportunity to answer each other's question, and they got in the habit of waiting for me to jump in. So it actually created more work than anything else, and I ended up dropping the tool. So if people have best practices that they want to share or they could share about Piazza, I would really welcome them.
Yeah, any Piazza users out there that have some suggestions for Jerome?
I use it, but I have the same issues, and the only thing saving me is that my TAs are very on top of it this semester. But otherwise,
right,
the students don't answer each other's questions. They just wait, and they also don't search to see if their question's already been asked.
Yeah,
right,
that's been my experience too. And pushing the work down to our TAs is not necessarily the solution that we want to go for, because they're already overworked. My TAs each have 80 students they're responsible for. That's a lot of grading just right there. So
right, my students aren't coming to office hours, so they've just taken to answering Piazza questions during office hours is sort of what that's looking like for them. It's just transitioning how that looks.
That's that's something. Are there ways that we can create incentives for students to take on some of that peer-to-peer support? Does anyone have any ideas on how to do that? In some ways, this would be if we can figure out how to do it, if we can crack this code, that'd be great, right? Because we know that when students explain things to other students, it's good not just for the students that are hearing it, it's good for the students that are saying it, right? It's deeper learning because they're thinking about, well, how am I going, this is how I understand it, but how do I say it? And how do I say it to this particular audience person? It's like that activity where you say, please explain what you've learned to your grandmother, to your, 8-year-old sibling or cousin or whatever, forcing the students to think about how they would explain whatever they learned or extend it in a different language, in a different format, in a tweet, in a blog post, in a video, whatever the different medium is a great way to get this to happen. If maybe we can incentivize that, and make it an assignment. How do you understand that? Tweet about it here in 144 characters. It's gone up, but in this constraint space. Yeah, and you're right. It's absolutely this is more than just Piazza, and it can be any discussion online forum. How do we get the students to do some of the work? One of my favorite quotes is from Erica Halverson, and she reminded us in a presentation, whoever does the work does the learning. So if we set it up so that we are always in answering the questions for the students, it's on us. But if we can figure out a way to shift that to the students to support each other, and I don't know the best way of doing that. There are discussion tools out there that will give points for every response that is a certain length to encourage the students to collect points that will that in theory incentivize them to contribute useful information to each other. All right, so good. Piazza user here, Duncan, says that we can list the students by order of participation and reward. So it's almost like a leaderboard, right? Of like top contributors or and the what's in it for me. You're absolutely right, Kathy. This is part of the, until our students get that intrinsic reward and they get that aha moment of, oh, this is valuable if I do this, then we have to rely on the extrinsic rewards, which is the oh, here's 3 points, here's 2 points, this is for your grade, it is part of what you need to do, and it's less fun. That can come off as busy work sometimes, unless we talk about the learning as well. So good. All right, we got a definition. What's in it for me is WIFM. I like that. Any other thoughts on that first point before we jump into the table? Any other ideas that people have? And I'll give you like 30 seconds to think of a question or think of an answer while I collect the attendance list. Go ahead, Karen.
Put on my microphone. Just a quick thing. I don't use Piazza. I just use in the Canvas discussion forum a simple Q&A area, so I don't have to go to another tool to look for it. And I encourage the students to, if they have a generic question, to post it there. So yes, I might be the one answering it, but at least I'm not answering the same one 20 or 30 times. So that way you could have a TA and all of them look just at that one Q&A discussion forum. And if you get students sending questions that are generic, say post it in there, because I'll answer it in there. Only I answer personal questions via email. So it doesn't help totally, but it does help quite a bit without having the same question asked over and over again. So they, so students may answer it, but even if they don't, it saves a lot of time.
Yeah, and you can create as far as strategies for doing a little bit less work and still being super responsive. If a question comes up, once and you recognize that this is going to be coming up a few more times, or if it's come up in past classes, be proactive with frequently asked questions or a video that addresses these questions in before you make that assignment. All right. So Our first question here is, let's see, how do we enable students to interact with each other? Are there best practices? And how do we do it in a conversational or informal way, right? Because oftentimes we force it, right? And the students are like, okay, I will answer this question to the requirements, and I don't want to do it, but I have to do it, and it comes off as something that they don't want to do and they have to do, and it's awful. So this is the time for you all to jump in, and right under here, we've got Angela already jumped in with one. We can have your ideas and thoughts added to the right-hand column here on how you think we can enable students to interact with each other, best practices, things you've tried that have worked. Share also things that you've tried that have not worked, because we have to learn from failure as well. Angela, go ahead.
I did not write that. Just I don't want to take credit
okay.
for it. My cursor just happened to be below it.
Got it.
Someone else put it. But another thing I've used this semester for a seminar course, it's asynchronous, is, I've probably said this many times in active teaching lab, but I hate the Canvas discussion boards. They feel so clunky to me and not conversational because of how they're structured. So I've been using just like a collaborative Google Doc where, so for example, the students watch a video that one student has prepared. That particular student has a few discussion questions, and then I also grab discussion questions that were generated by the group and put them into sort of a table where the questions are on one side and then there's places for students to put answers, and then they are able to answer the question, like the discussion question, but they can also add on to what other people have put, and they just use different colors and sign what they wrote. And it's the same idea of a discussion board, but for my brain, it feels more like a connected conversation because they're like adding on to each other's comments. So that's been pretty successful. And even though their posts are separated temporally, there's a little bit of back and forth that happens, and they kind of address each other in their posts and stuff. So that's another idea, is using like a collaborative document as a way to make it a little more, I don't know, informal or conversational.
And I think that you bring up a really interesting point here. If you think about this traditional students in that 18 to 25-year-old demographic that we often find in the majority of the folks in our class. And a disclaimer there, again, not the only folks in our class, so grain of salt with this, but look at how they're communicating, outside of class. If you want them to have conversational tones in your class, look at what they're using outside of their class to talk to each other. Look at Snapchat, look at TikTok, look at the texting apps, whatever they are, WhatsApp that they have, and say, what are the things that they're doing in that space? And can they also do it in our Canvas discussion space? The answer is no, you can't. You can't do emoji, you can't do quick, images, you can't take photos of yourself or videos of yourself easily as a student in a Canvas discussion. You can take a picture of yourself, download it to whatever, and then upload it into Canvas. And then in Canvas, you can insert that image and do all that thing. And it takes 1,200 steps to share an image in a Canvas discussion. It's a terrible interface. If we want it to be a conversational, easy, low barrier tool for them to communicate with each other informally. This reminds me also that currently, Piazza is probably going to go away. Piazza is no longer free. They're going to start to charge quite a bit of money to use it. And from what I'm hearing, this is an opportunity for campus to look at other tools that might have some of the same capabilities and more capabilities. So to all of you in this session, if you have heard of tools that we should look into, now is a good time to bring them up into conversations and get some steam or thoughts around it so that we can look into those tools and say, is this viable for our campus? Not just, unfortunately, given how well does it work for teaching and learning, but you know, privacy issues, legal issues, and all of the campus administrative issues as well. Those are all factors in there. And it's a tough conversation to have. And Melissa, to your point, you are absolutely right. And math department is not going to be the only ones that are going to be sad to see it go away. And maybe Pat, it will go, or maybe it'll stick around. It's currently going to stay till June 30th, but we're starting to have conversations about what other options exist. What can we move to? Are there better ones? So ask all your math colleagues for other options. Maybe there are some better ones. Okay, would you recommend multiple deadlines for a discussion board? For example, one deadline to add comments and another one to add the main thread. I'm currently looking at Yellow Dig, and Yellow Dig has this great graphic. Actually, Yellow Dig, just like the color and then the shovel dig, has a great training course. So you can be a certified Yellow Dig person. That's kind of a fun, I don't know, I was very pessimistic or skeptical when I started taking that, but in the first 10 minutes of that training course, I was like, this is really a powerful, powerful pedagogy that they're using. And they're starting with the pedagogical elements of, and they're looking at motivation. They're looking at who posts first and who posts last, and what effect does that have when everybody waits until the end of the deadline before posting. There's no chance for any sort of interaction, right? So yes, if you're going to have a post and respond type question, you need to have, I think, two deadlines. One that says make a post and do it, you know, by with enough time between when you make that initial post and when the class starts, or when you want a follow-up post, that everybody can get in there. So yes, two deadlines for that. Now the tricky part about that is that in Canvas comes up as two assignments, and that's clumsy. So again, another thing for a tool. If you're looking for a tool that works better for these kinds of interactions, look for one that does that better. Angela, you have other ideas. Thank you.
Yeah, I guess to follow up with using a collaborative doc or something where there's multiple optional prompts to choose from, one way to kind of encourage people to get started is that the prompts, maybe you only have a certain, like only so many people can respond to each prompt. So only 3 people allowed to respond to each question, say in a group of 10, whatever the issue is. That way there's a little bit of a impetus to like be an earlier responder. So there could be ways to build in, you know, you've got your deadline just to help, because if there's got to be a response, I feel like, yeah, there should be a deadline for the first post just so that things don't slide off the end of the week. But there could be ways to incentivize it that, you know, by making your post sooner, maybe you get your choice of the question, or, you know, working something in where there's more flexibility to make it, I don't know, more appealing, I guess, to get started earlier. And then on that note too, I think thinking about group size is also important. If it's the whole class is going to respond on one discussion post, I think that makes it a lot more intimidating for students to get the ball rolling versus if you're doing, you know, smaller groups on a discussion board or on a collaborative document, as I'm trying to sell those, that's like 3 or 4 or 5, then it's less, there's less maybe anxiety around being the first to post because it's a smaller group that's going to see your post.
And smaller groups is a huge part of this as far as student anxiety as well, because we are more quickly able to figure out and develop some semblance of trust and understanding of who the players are in this small group than we would be in a much larger group. So that ability to put ourselves forward and take risks, I guess, is lower, is accomplished faster in a smaller group. So that is one of the things we have in the our suggestions down below on the activity sheet. The other thing that you talked about is ways to encourage that early jumping into the post. One of the ways that I heard about just recently, shared, and it's a thing that I've done in the past, is I've said, all right, students, here's a list of articles. Pick one, claim an article or claim a video to look at, and then make that the issue, the one of your post. And so it's an incentive for the students to get in there and get the good videos before all the good videos are gone. It's kind of crappy for the person who, maybe through no fault of their own, they couldn't get in right away and they are stuck with a crappy video. But then I've always said, if none of these work, find another one and let me know and I'll probably approve it, which is great because that gets them to pick the one that they want to do or that fits their, I want to present this kind of a video versus that kind of video. But it also gets them out looking at several videos or readings to get to that point. And every time they look at a video about the content and content area, it's a little bit different. It's another connection with the course content. And that's great. It's more work for them, but it's great for their learning. Jerome, go ahead.
Yeah, I have a question that's related to this issue of deadlines and the question I see two steps down on the way to incentivize students' participation. I've read somewhere that using the conditional release of materials on Canvas can be a way to incentivize students' use of or participation in discussion sections or discussion forums rather. Where a student would have to participate in a forum before the next module in Canvas would open up, for example. And I'm torn on this issue because I could see that it would be a powerful incentive. You don't have access to the rest of the course unless you participate. At the same time, I'm afraid that it would encourage meaningless participation. So there's the issue of encouraging participation, but then, that participation has to be good rather than, hey, I'm posting because I want to see everybody else answers, which I've seen on discussion forums. Right. So, how do you balance these two things and have people experimented with using the conditional release tool as a way of forcing students' participation and what are best practices that people have found?
I've also seen that similar and heard stories of that similar. Okay, you can't see other responses until you post your own. Sounds good in theory, but then the post is I just want to see stuff, submit, then they can see stuff and they can go back in later on and edit what they did. So it's kind of a cheat. Students are incredibly clever and they help each other cheat, game the system all the time. So if there are ways that we could figure out to help them game the system to help us and help their learning, that's great. But yeah, in Yellow, I was talking about Yellow Dig again, and apologies, I'm not pushing that tool. I'm not, what's the word, advocating for it at this point. But one of the things that they said was they feel like the initial post is actually not the most important thing. It should just be a thing that the responses, if the responses are good, they can be much more interesting and much better than any initial, like, what are your reactions to the reading? Or that initial post that we have students do is often just a first thought. And it doesn't involve other people looking at it and saying, well, what about this area? Or yes, and, or yes, but, or let's take it further. The really interesting stuff happens in a good discussion after that initial thought. And so they actually reward responses more than they reward posts. They also do the thing where you have to have you can set the length. And I think it's currently like 40 words. If it's 40 words, then you get points for the post. If it's less than 40 words, then you don't get points. And as you're typing that up, there's a little slider that's going along and saying, you're almost there, 3 more words. And that feels really like, I am just going to type until I see the bar go all the way across and now I submit. I don't know. Again, good question. I don't know the answer. Angela, you have an idea?
Yeah, I guess as Jerome was talking, I was thinking about, if the issue is like they're nervous or afraid or, whatever, there's trepidation about making the first post because they haven't like gathered their thoughts sufficiently. Another strategy might be that it's like a 2-part activity where the first part is maybe a Canvas quiz or something where they're drafting out thoughts or sharing thoughts, and maybe there's a feedback mechanism there, and then they kind of transition to the conversation part. What is that? There's also, it's like a think, pair, share almost, but building it into the discussion where there's an element of it where they do get to bounce some ideas off in a safe way, and then they can kind of use that to build their larger thought or argument. Might be a tool to use.
Yeah, I've seen 3 C's in a Q, which is a comment, a clarification, or can't think of the third C, and then a question. So if you're going to have a response, you need to say, oh, get it over with. I agree with what Angela said, right? They're going to say that. That shouldn't be the whole response to the post. Then they do a clarification. By whatever, did you mean, you know, and they restate it in different words or in sort of a question form of a clip for asking for clarification. And then a question, confirmation. Thank you, Steve. Yeah, I can see this point here that you made, sort of an affirmation. It might be confirmation. I'm still not sure. I need to look it up. And then finally ask a question. What would happen if your idea was extended in this way? Or does your idea apply to this situation or that situation? So those are, you know, a thoughtful way to structure those pieces of those conversational pieces. And in an ideal world, conversations in our informal worlds, they're informal. They don't necessarily follow rigid rules the way that these asynchronous things generally happen to do that. Thank you. Compliment, comment, and connect. That was the third C. And then question. Thanks for looking that up, Angela. Another method is a snowball effect, where you have to take what the person said and add something else to it. You can structure these conversations by saying, all right, first person who participates has to agree with the person. The second person has to disagree with and provide evidence on why the disagreement is there. First person and provide evidence supporting that. Third person, they need to take the two together and say, you're right and here's the connection piece between the two of them. That can be hard, you know. And then the fourth person, I don't know. I've done things where we read controversial readings, and then they are assigned to different roles of a author advocate, devil's advocate, mediator, and then troll. And the whole idea of the troll is, I know who you are, so don't be a total jerk, but you have to play the role of being a total jerk in a nice way. Also showing that you've read the work, but the idea is give a little pushback here in this protected space so that people get more used to how do I deal with trolls, because they're not going away. Excellent. All right, other ideas for the multiple discussions. It's clumsy. Yeah, it is. Encouragement can be better. Taking that list from choosing those things. I think part of it is also just having heart-to-heart conversations with your students, you know, in class. What are the benefits of waiting until the last minute to post? Are there any drawbacks? Oh, yes, you all see that there are drawbacks. Okay, so next week, let's try to get this all done by this time so that we can have you know, useful responses by that time. And it might just be that they're following along what they always do, which is the path of least resistance, which is 5 minutes before it's due. Oh, I better go in and make my post and my responses. I do that. So yeah. All right, related to the discussion boards, what are the best ways for students to sort through the posts to avoid repetition, asking the same questions again and again? This is another thing that Canvas does terribly, in my opinion. It's really hard, especially you know, in Jerome's case, with 800 students trying to participate in a forum. You can be scrolling for days and you will miss things. It's just hard. I feel like the best suggestion that I can come up with right now is to break those make the group small so that they aren't going in and checking through all of the discussion posts that everybody does, but they just look at their own group and say, all right, between the 5 of us, have we been able to figure this out? And if not, what can we do to figure out this problem before we open it up to everybody else? And in some ways, that's kind of filtering it instead of in a large group and addressing it 800 times, you filter it between the 5 into one comment or question, and then that gets reported out maybe into a Padlet where you've got group 1's big takeaways and group 2's big takeaways or questions. And that might make it a little bit easier to sort through because you've reduced it by a factor of 5. All right, other ideas. Let's see, I let my students build on each other's questions. Yeah, great. That's the snowball idea. So if one person's bringing up topic A, then another person can say they agree and also, and that's great. And that's the comment, confirmation, connection, compliment, etc. A unique contribution. One of the other things, and this brings up building off of this unique contribution, all of our students are different. All of the students are unique. All of our students have their own incentives for taking the class, incentives for being in college, dreams, passions, skills. What can you do in your discussion prompt that pulls in that unique element and says, this isn't about the content unrelated to you, but how do you connect to the content? What question do your skills, dreams, passions, experiences, etc. bring to that unique perspective, bring to this content? And how do we make that connection? And if you can make that connection, that's better because the students will feel, oh, this isn't about something that I'm not interested in, because they've just brought their personality, their identity, pieces of who they are into the conversation and connected it to the content. It becomes their learning again. Other people have different ideas and thoughts. Feel free again to raise your hand, share, or unmute, or add in the chat box on the side. Those of you who have been helping other faculty members with their courses, instructors with your courses, do you have any things that you've seen? I know I've got a couple people on the call here who have seen this done several times in several ways. Yeah, Peter, thank you.
I've been, Alex, so this picks up on some of the comments that we already addressed, but I've been experimenting a little bit with using asynchronous online discussion boards as kind of a preparation for a synchronous discussion. So of course, this doesn't work for courses that are completely online, in an asynchronous way. But the results that I'm finding and the experiences I have with it are good so far because say if the initial post is on an analysis of a research paper or a couple of research papers, then the first post kind of like brings the discussion at a much higher level and provides an opportunity for people that might lag in a face-to-face type discussion or might be hesitant to express their opinion to kind of have a level starting position for a synchronous discussion. So that's an idea I think that's worth considering because it brings the discussion to a higher level because you
Yeah.
don't have to listen to somebody explain their things because you've already read about it.
And I think that's a really good point. And it gets to the idea of universal design for learning, which is providing multiple means for the students to express themselves and engage. If we can have a synchronous discussion, and if it's a totally asynchronous class, then that makes it difficult to do, right? But if you have a synchronous discussion or a synchronous class that has asynchronous work in it, it's a great opportunity to say, let's have a discussion, and then let's extend it in this chat or in this online forum, or vice versa. Let's start off with the online forum and then extend that into a synchronous space. And that way the online forum gives people a chance to practice things out. It's very important for some students to be able to write information, write what they want to say down, look at it, proof it, run it by a friend of theirs to make sure that they're not going to make a fool out of themselves. And then they hit submit. So in a synchronous class, we force them to jump in and make mistakes, and it's embarrassing, and it's a shame of I didn't read the assignment. So if we can use it as sort of a practice space and then extend it in both places, it can help both people, including the ones that are like, "Ooh, pick me, I've got it all figured out right now." They will thrive in that synchronous space. But the ones that are a little bit more thoughtful, who need a little bit more time, and oftentimes more deep. They give more deep conversations or make deeper points after they have a time to sort of digest it a little bit, roll it around, and then hit submit. Excellent. I see let's see. Is that your hand? You're the only one whose hand is up, Peter?
John, I was going to jump in, and I have to
thank
leave
you.
in a minute. So this is Teresa. I
Hey,
wanted
Teresa.
to just follow up on what Peter was saying, that I've had success in my own course, but also with a lot of instructors. I've helped with planning this like asynchronous time bookended by synchronous moments where like the students might get together with you or with each other, with you in the room, quote unquote, to kickstart their asynchronous time and even plan out how they're going to go about it, like how they're going to work together or have an initial conversation. And then whether it's over the rest of the afternoon or a 48-hour period, have that intentionally bookended by like the next synchronous time to come back together. I found that really helpful. And then the other thing that I'm hearing from this conversation that I have found with that, it helps to manage the instructor's involvement in what that asynchronous time looks like, because I have found that those book-ended synchronous planning wrap-up sessions are times for students to ask me questions that they otherwise might feel I could respond to on Piazza, et cetera, when I really can't. So this is even going back to what I heard Jerome say about managing the scope of student work in that. This technique has helped to put some limitations around it.
Yeah, and that constraint is great. If you can, it's great for several things. It provides that structure that students need for their timing, where you're not saying, "Oh, it's open-ended between now and the next class period or now and next week." It has to be done in a shorter amount of time. But within that short amount of time, you have some flexibility. You have the time to proofread, to respond or not respond. So that might be a good way to sort of, I don't know, a happy medium, a nice compromise. It's definitely worth trying. And then I really like what Duncan, what you wrote in the chat, where again, this is a great structuring method where you contribute in order, so that you are warned when you are going to have to contribute, and it can be that way again asynchronously as well. Next week, I want you to lead the discussion and be involved in the discussion. So that gives a student a chance to prepare with questions and stuff, instead of saying, "All right, everybody," and then the great reveal or unveiling, and now go figure it out. They will be doing the great unveiling because they will be figuring it out and structuring it and in charge and in control. There's one more thing. Melissa talks about the this interdependence from group to group. And I love that idea as well, where you can have student or group A create something, group B do something with that, group 3, take it one step further. That way, again, it avoids that, well, what are we going to do? It gives them some structure to work with. And there's an additional element of sort of a peer accountability in that as well, right? Our group doesn't want to put together some crappy thing that somebody else has to deal with. So maybe because it's not just, oh, the 5 of us in our group and the instructor who nobody cares about, maybe because we're creating something that another group has to work with, the quality level will be higher. And if it's not super high, well, that's a good problem solving for the next group to have to figure out as well. How do we deal with things that aren't perfect? So excellent. It is 1:57. I want to be respectful of your time, and I was given the suggestion that some people have 2 o'clock meetings that they want to leave early. So if you do, feel free to please do that and do that. If not, I'll stick around for the next couple of minutes, and I will just quickly go through the incentivization again. The what's in it for me is again really good. It's not always incentivized extrinsically again by grades, but there can be things by students supporting each other, building social capital, things like that. And then some examples to look at. How does Mentimeter work on it? And how does Reddit do that? Those are great examples in real life of tools that do get great participation without grades. And this last one, how do we post and react? That's a tough one. I would say to have it in 2 places, make one of them anonymous so the students can't see each other. Again, Piazza would be a great spot for that, where you can see who the students are, but the students can't see who they are. And this might be something that you don't do as a discussion. It could just be something that you do as an anonymous survey, where they get graded for participating in it, but even you don't get to see who does makes what comments. But then you go back in and you share those anonymous results. Let's say, 80% of you found this, 20% of you thought this, and bring it back to address without names attached to it. All right, it's 2 o'clock. Thank you all for sticking around, and I hope you have a great weekend. And if you want to keep talking, unmute yourself and jump in, go dig deeper.